Okay, hello everybody, and thank you for joining today's CMS Web Interface support call. During today's webinar, CMS will provide an overview of 2019 CMS Web Interface quality reporting for MIPS groups and ACOs. And after the webinar, we will take as many questions as time allows. So now I'll turn it over to Lisa Marie Gomez from CMS to begin.
Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today as ACOs, MIPS groups, and virtual groups prepare to report quality data reporting via the CMS Web Interface. Again, my name is Lisa Marie Gomez, and I'm with CMS. I'm a subject matter expert on the CMS Web Interface. Joining me on the call today are other CMS subject matter experts and contractors who will share helpful information regarding quality data reporting through the CMS Web Interface, and will answer your questions during the question and answer portion of today's presentation. Today's call is focused on quality reporting. If you have any questions regarding promoting interoperability, improvement activities, MIPS, or general questions regarding quality reporting, you can contact the Quality Payment Program Service Center. Next slide, please. Before we begin this presentation, we just want to note that the information presented in today's presentation is current at the time of its publication. Medicare policies change frequently. We encourage you to review and use the source documents and links that are provided throughout the presentation. And please stay tuned for any communication from the Quality Payment Program, Medicare Shared Savings Program, or the Next Generation ACO model regarding any updated information. Next slide, please. We would like to let you know that the recording slides and transcripts for the January 15th support call are now available on the Quality Payment Program webinar. Please note that the date on the webinar library currently has a recorded date of January 28th, but please be assured that these materials are from the January 15th support call, and we're working to make a correction to the recorded date. Next slide, please. The submission period for the CMS Web Interface aligns with other submission types for the 2019 performance year, which opened on January 2nd, 2020, and will close at 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on March 31st, 2020. Once the submission period closes, the CMS Web Interface will automatically accept your submission. As a reminder, the CMS Web Interface is accessible using the sign-in link on the Quality Payment Program website. Next slide, please. As you may know, today is part of a series of CMS Web Interface support calls held weekly throughout the data submission period. The next support call will be held next Wednesday, February 5th, 2020, from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Topics will include assignment and sampling, FAQs, and frequently asked measure questions regarding the following measures: HTN2, MH1, and PREV12. Additional topics may be added prior to the support call. Next slide, please. As a reminder, the other CMS approved reason skip requests must be submitted through the CMS Web Interface. This is a way to skip a patient attributed to a measure during denominator confirmation. The CMS approved reason is reserved for circumstances that are unique, unusual, and not covered by any of the denominator exclusions or denominator exceptions identified in the measure specification. Patients for whom a CMS approved reason is selected will be skipped, and another patient must be reported in their place for the measure if available. Next slide, please. As a reminder, the 2019 CMS Web Interface API is available all year for testing in the developer preview environment. You can review the resources listed on this slide for more information. Next slide, please. Now we'll be discussing measure bonus points, specifically pertaining to high priority measures and end-to-end electronic reporting. Next slide, please. So in regard to the high priority measure bonus points, there is a difference in how the bonus is applied to groups and virtual groups and ACOs. For mixed groups and virtual groups reporting via the CMS Web Interface, the high priority measure bonus points will no longer be awarded starting with the 2019 performance year. Just want to note that groups and virtual groups reporting via the CMS Web Interface that elected to report the CAHPS for MIPS survey are able to earn high priority measure bonus points for reporting the survey. For ACOs, the high priority measure bonus points are still available to ACOs reporting via the CMS Web Interface and scored under the APM scoring standard. Next slide, please. Now I will discuss the end-to-end electronic reporting bonus. So how are end-to-end electronic reporting bonus points earned in the CMS Web Interface? So measure data electronically uploaded into the CMS Web Interface via the API, also known as the Application Programming Interface, or Excel file upload, are eligible for end-to-end electronic reporting bonus. You can earn 1 bonus point per each CMS Web Interface measure, which is capped at 10% of your denominator. To earn the end-to-end electronic reporting bonus points in the CMS Web Interface, you need to update or complete at least 1 or more patients in a measure via API or Excel file upload to earn 1 bonus point for that measure. Once you earn an end-to-end electronic reporting bonus for a measure using the API or Excel file upload, you can then update your patients in the measure manually through the CMS Web Interface data entry pages and still keep the bonus point. You will not lose your bonus for manually updating a patient. It should be noted that the end-to-end electronic reporting bonus, if earned, is available to ACOs, groups, and virtual groups reporting via the CMS Web Interface. Next slide, please. So last week during the CMS Web Interface support call, we received several auditing questions surrounding the 2019 PREV 12 measure, specifically the prevention, care, and screening for depression and follow-up plan measure. Now I will provide an update. Next slide, please. So in cases where the 2019 PREV 12 measure is audited, medical record documentation demonstrating that measure specifications have been met will be required. This includes documentation of the following. So per page 6 of the 2019 and 2020 measure specifications, the name of the age-appropriate standardized depression screening tool utilized must be documented in the medical record. Per page 10 of the 2020 and 2019 measure specifications, the results must be reviewed, verified, and documented by the eligible professional in the medical record on the date of the encounter to meet the screening portion of this measure. Please note, as the measure is pay for reporting for the 2019 performance year, CMS will accept previously allowed documentation or documentation outline in the 2019 measure specifications in cases where this measure is audited for the 2019 performance year. Again, I'm going to repeat this last statement. For the 2019 PREV 12 measure, CMS will accept previously allowed documentation or documentation outlined in the 2019 measure specifications in cases where this measure is audited for the 2019 performance year. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Angie Stevenson to discuss frequently asked measure questions. Angie?
Hi everyone, this is Angie from PIMS. I'm going to share some of the recent CMS Web Interface measure questions we've received at the QPP. The first measure is Care 2, and the first question is this measure restricted to an office setting? The answer is no, the setting of the screening is not restricted to an office setting. Next question is, will a physical therapist note indicating a false screening was performed from an inpatient stay pass this measure? Answer is yes. The measure does not limit the eligible clinician type or setting. The numerator guidance in the measure spec states a clinician with appropriate skills and experience may perform this screening. The setting of the screening is not restricted to an office. Next question, if the patient is non-ambulatory at any time during the measurement period, can they be excluded? Per the measure specifications, the denominator exclusion only applies if the patient is non-ambulatory at the most recent encounter during the measurement period. And next question is, what time frame should we use to assess a history of falls Example, falls in the previous 12 months, falls in the previous calendar year, any history of falls. The numerator guidance on page 8 of the measure specification states any history of falls screening during the measurement period is acceptable to meet the intent of the measure. Next slide, please. Okay, these questions are for the MH1 depression remission at 12 months measure. First question, can a PHQ-9A be used for the MH1 measure for adolescents? The answer is no. Per the numerator guidance in the measure specification, the only tools appropriate for indicating remission is a completed PHQ-9 or a PHQ-9M. Question 2, does the entire PHQ-9 need to be filled out if the patient answers not at all for the first 2 questions? The answer is yes. Per the denominator guidance in the measure specifications, all 9 questions must be answered to have a valid summary score. Question 3, can the PHQ-9 be performed inpatient, or should it be performed during the outpatient encounters only? The PHQ-9 may be administered in any setting per the denominator guidance in the measure specifications. PHQ-9 or PHQ-9M administration does not require a face-to-face visit. Multiple modes of administration are acceptable: telephone, email, e-visit, email, patient portal, iPad, tablet, or patient kiosk. Next question, please. Next slide, please. This question is for the PREV-5 breast cancer screening measure. Why does the description in the measure specification say women 50 to 74 years of age, but the initial population says women 51 to 74 years, which is correct? The patient isn't considered eligible for the denominator until they are age 51, but mammograms received beginning at age 50 can be used to satisfy the numerator. The 15-month look-back period allows the year prior, 12 months, and an additional 3-month grace period, total of 15 months, which means a patient may have been 49 years old when they received a mammogram. And this scenario would still be considered performance met. Next slide, please. This is for the PREV-6 colorectal cancer screening. Is the Cologuard test an acceptable form of screening to meet PREV-6 for 2019? The answer is yes. Cologuard is an FOBT test and is acceptable for the measure. Please note that the measure specifications state it is up to the organization to determine whether the specific test or brand meets the definition. Question 2, if the FOBT is done in the office and sent to a lab, is this acceptable for the measure? If not, where must it be done to be valid? I want to mention that last week we had a similar live question on the call, and this answer is also intended to clarify the guidance given on that call. So the answer is no. Per clarification with the measure steward, the intent is to exclude all FOBT tests performed in an office setting. FOBT tests performed at home and brought to the office to be sent to a lab may be included. So the measure owner's intent is to exclude any and all FOBT tests done in the office. Question 3, is FIT acceptable as a colon screening alternative or only FIT DNA? The answer is yes. The FIT is a fecal occult blood test, FOBT, and is acceptable for the measure. Next slide, please. These questions are for the PREB 12 Screening for Depression and Follow-Up Plan. Question 1, if a PHQ-9 score is 5 or more, is the screening considered positive? The answer is whether or not a standardized screening tool score is considered positive or negative would be determined by the eligible professional administering and reviewing the standardized tool results. Next question is, what if the total score is documented for PHQ-9, but the provider did not document whether the screening was positive or negative? The measure does not require documentation of a specific score, but it does require documentation of whether the screening results are considered positive or negative. Next slide, please. These questions are for the PREB 13 statin therapy for the prevention and treatment of cardiovascular disease. First question, if a patient is on a combination drug, example, simvastatin, niacin, XR, can we count the patient as being on a statin? The answer is yes. The denominator guide states that any statin therapy is acceptable. The list of statins under the clinical recommendation section of the measure specifications and within the 2019 PREB coding document are not exhaustive lists of acceptable statins. Both generic and brand name drugs are acceptable. And the last question is, please clarify the look-back period for the LDL-C results in the diagnosis of familial or pure hypercholesterolemia for the PREB 13 statin measure for population 2. The time period to confirm the denominator for population 2 is any time during or prior to the measurement period. There is no limit for the look-back period. Thank you, everyone. I'll hand it back over to Lisa Marie Gomez at CMS.
Thanks, Angie. So now we'll go to slide 20. So these next few slides will outline the available CMS Web Interface resources. Now we'll go to slide 21. So please note that the 2019 materials providing information on the MIPS Quality Performance category are available on the Quality Payment Program Resource Library. We encourage you to review these resources if you have questions regarding quality measures and reporting requirements for the CMS Web Interface. We'll continue to communicate any future postings and upcoming support calls. Next slide, please. The Quality Payment Program Webinar Library also contains recordings, slides, and transcripts for past QPP webinars, including the recent 2019 CMS Web Interface user demonstration held in November, the CMS Web Interface kickoff call held in December, and the CMS Web Interface weekly support call session 1 from January 15th. As previously indicated, please note that the date on the webinar library currently has a recorded date of January 28th, and this is for the January 15th support call that we just had. But please be assured that these materials are from the January 15th support call, and we're working to make the correction to the recorded date. Please note that it takes about 2 weeks to post the weekly support call presentations to the library following a webinar. Additionally, the help and support page on the QPP website contains links to materials such as videos, webinars, and online courses, as well as other items to help with reporting and development. Next slide, please. This slide contains links to resources available for the Medicare Shared Savings Program, ACOs, and Next Generation ACO model. We encourage you to review the materials available here and sign up to each newsletter for more information. Next slide, please. If you need additional assistance, please refer to the contact information listed on this slide. Next slide, please. Before we begin the Q&A portion of this support call, I would like to discuss an opportunity for you to provide input. If you're interested in providing feedback and collaborating with CMS on the Quality Payment Program, we encourage you to participate in our human-centered design efforts. To get involved, please email your name, title, name of your organization, and topic of interest to QPP user research at cms.hhs.gov. Now I will turn this portion of the support call to Lauren Kiefer to begin the Q&A.
Great, thank you, Lisa Marie. All right, so now we'll start the question and answer session of today's call. If you have a question, please feel free to submit it via the questions tab on your screen, or raise your hand, that's next to your name in the attendees tab, and we will go ahead and unmute your line. We will always say your name before unmuting your line. So first we'll begin with a few questions from the questions tab. It asks, for MH1, does a follow-up PHQ-9 have to be completed by the same provider practice where the index date was for the measure was established?
Hi, this is Katie from the PIMS team. So no, there's no requirement within the measure specifications that the follow-up PHQ-9 during the measure assessment period needs to be completed by the same practice or the same provider. You would just need to have medical record documentation of both that initial PHQ-9 as well as the follow-up PHQ-9. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next question asks, for PRES 13, if a patient qualifies for an exception but is also taking a statin, what should we report?
This is Deb from the PIMS team. If a patient is taking a statin and you have also a denominator exception, you can go ahead and report performance met for that patient on the statin. Where you would not want to report is if the patient qualified for a denominator exclusion. If they qualify for a denominator exclusion, in that case, you have to select the exclusion, different than the exception. With the exception, if the patient is on a statin, you can report that they're on the statin.
Great, thank you. All right, your next question asks, for lab tests that meet measures for the date, do you use the date collected or the date resulted to determine if it is in the time frame to meet the measure?
And this is Deb again. I am going to give an answer just for the DM2 measure because we've seen this question come through before. You would use the lab report draw date, which is identified on page 8 of the posted specification. If you are asking about lab results from any of the other measures, I would request that you go ahead and submit the question again with a specific measure identified. Thank you.
All right. This is a reminder to everybody on the phone line. If you'd like to ask a question, you will need to have your phone line connected to the audio. So first, we'll begin with Jason Shropshire. Jason, we're unmuting your line, and you may go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. So I need some further clarification on the screening portion of the PREV 12 measure, specifically when a PHQ-2 or 9 is the total is 0. Can you please confirm and clarify? So if the score is 0, meaning the patient in no way can be deemed depressed, you're saying we have to count the numerator as failure unless the provider or clinician specifically reviews that test and determines that the patient is not depressed, even though in no way, shape, or form they could be because the score is 0.
Katie, would someone from your team be able to address that?
Hi, this is Katie from the PIMS team. So in terms of 2019 reporting, CMS has indicated they'll allow what was previously allowed for 2018. So I believe previously allowed documentation indicated that scores of 0 could be assumed negative. So for 2019 reporting, those will be accepted. And if you have any further questions, we can also see if Telegen has anything else to add to that statement. Thank you.
So thanks, that answers my question. I think it would be really helpful if you guys documented that clearly and put that out in the next support call. Thank you.
Thank you for your feedback.
All right, your next question asks, regarding the CARE2 measure, if a patient was listed as a fall risk while hospitalized or evaluated for falls during a rehabilitation consult, does that meet the measure?
So this is Deb. On page 8 of the posted specification, in the guidance numerator note, it does state that setting of screening is not restricted to an office setting. So as long as you are meeting the definition of a falls risk screen, it would be acceptable regardless of the setting. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Another setting question asks, for the HTN2 measure, can the blood pressure reading be accepted if done at a nurse visit and billed under a CPT 99211?
Hi, this is Katie from the PIMS team again. So for this measure, the requirement is that the blood pressure must be taken by a clinician. In terms of the specific setting, there's no setting parameters required, although the measure is intended to be outpatient. So as long as you have medical record documentation that the blood pressure was taken by a clinician for which your organization takes credit for and is the most recent within your medical record, you would be able to use that. But if you have further questions regarding a specific setting or code, we would ask that you submit a case to qpp@cms.hhs.gov. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, your next question asks, Track 1 ACOs, are they not eligible for bonus points?
For the Medicare Shared Savings Program and Next Generation ACO scoring methodology, measured bonus points are not used.
All right, lovely. Next question concerns Prep 13. It asks, if a patient has chronic hepatitis C, which is an exclusion, but the patient is also prescribed a statin, should the patient be listed as an exclusion, or yes, Pat is on a med?
And this is Deb from the PIMS team. Just to clarify, the Hep C is actually a denominator exception and not a denominator exclusion. So again, in this case, if the patient is on a statin, it would be considered a performance met. The denominator exclusions, if the patient fell into one of the three exclusions that's identified, in that case, regardless of being on a statin, you would exclude the patient. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, we'll go back to the phone line. So Marcella Shans, we are unmuting your line and you may go ahead.
Hi, this is Marcella. I have a question on hypertension. It says it's the last blood pressure of the year documented. We document in Epic, so we are seeing a lot of our partners in other facilities that document in Epic too. And we can see it through Care Everywhere. So do we take the last blood pressure of the year that we can see through Care Everywhere and other partners, or is it strictly to our facility?
So this is Katie from the PIMS team. My follow-up question to that would be, are you an ACO or are you a MIPS group?
We're an ACO.
Okay, and I'll let the ACO PAC team weigh in here as well if I misstate anything, but I believe the expectation is to coordinate care across organizations, so you would need to look for the most recent blood pressure across all organizations for which you have access to their EHRs.
Okay, so that's what we were doing. Now, yeah, in last week's call, y'all did say that you could take an ED blood pressure as long as it was not a procedure, or a diagnostic test or a procedure being done that day. So if the patient goes to the ED, even if it's in our partners for a fall or whatever, for pneumonia, we can take that blood pressure? Because I thought originally this was an outpatient measure.
Sure. Yep. And that was a clarification, I believe, from 2018 to 2019. So the intent is to be an outpatient measure. You can use the blood pressure from an inpatient or an ED visit if it's in control. If you find that it's out of control, then it would be appropriate to move to the next most recent blood pressure.
Okay, fantastic. One last question, now on the statin measure. Sometimes we find it that the patient is allergic to atorvastatin, to one statin, and the provider does not put intolerance to statin or myalgia or whatever other exclusions. Can we assume that the patient is allergic to all statins if it's just one statin?
So this is Deb. We can't assume anything, and the effect, allergy, or intolerance to statin medication would need to be documented during the performance period.
That we
So it
do
is
have it.
possible, say that if it was for 2019 and you have documentation of an allergy to a statin, that would be a denominator exception for 2019, but you can't assume that, say, an allergy to a statin in 2017 is the reason why a statin wasn't prescribed in 2019.
Perfect. Totally understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Your next question asks, for Care 2, if on the last encounter a patient reports a fall months prior and is non-ambulatory due to that fall, is this an exclusion or measure met since the patient reported the fall?
So this would be a denominator exclusion. On page 5 of the posted specification, you are to exclude patients who are assessed to be non-ambulatory during the measurement period, and the exclusion, the additional guidance for the exclusion is found, I'm sorry, I'm trying to scroll down there, further on in the spec. And that exclusion is if the patient is non-ambulatory at the last, let me find it so I can read it to you. I'm so sorry. Count as non-ambulatory only if non-ambulatory at the most recent encounter during the measurement period. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, your next question asks, for PREV 12, would a policy still be accepted for the name of the tool and the interpretation of the score?
Hi, this is Katie. Would someone from Intelligent be able to respond to that question, please?
Sure, this is Mary. This is Mary. Would you go ahead and submit that to the help desk, and we can discuss that with our folks here and provide you an answer?
Hi, this is Fiona from the Shared Savings Program. As we mentioned earlier on slide 12, as the measure is pay for reporting for 2019, any prior approved documentation will be accepted for PREV 12 for 2019.
Okay, wonderful. We've put slide 12 back on the screen just for everybody to see. We will put it back to the questions tab in just a moment. All right, so we will take a phone question from George Zelenkov. George, we are unmuting your line, and you may go ahead.
Thank you. This question kind of refers to multiple measures, for instance, colonoscopy, mammogram, measures that have a look-back period. Within the note, if a provider states, and it's still within the measurement period, that, for instance, a colonoscopy, they received that done last year, or they had a mammogram done 6 months ago, and it's still within the measure period and the patient's still within the age gap, can we accept that? Or do you need to be more of a specific of it was done May 1st, 2018 to count?
So this is Katie from the PIMS team. I believe each measure specification has its own documentation requirements, so we might need to take a closer look if there are additional measures in question here. I know for PREV 5 and PREV 6, you would just need to have the medical record documentation, the date, that includes the year and the type of test, along with the findings for both PREV 5 and PREV 6. If you have other measures that...
Is that a year, or can it be just a year, or does it need to be specific to the month and day as well?
I believe the measure specifications require just the year for PREV 5 and PREV 6.
Okay, if it falls within the window, obviously.
Correct, yeah, and particularly looking at PREV 6, because there are additional screening tests that you can use. They each have their own date parameters. So you would need to verify for each one of those that they were within the appropriate time frame.
No, I get that. For instance, if a colonoscopy was said it was done 8 years ago, we can accept that.
So you would need, it does require the date, the actual year that it was performed. So if it's documented 8 years.
So we're in the year 2019, and it says they had a colonoscopy done 8 years ago. It doesn't say it was done in 2011. It just said it was done 8 years ago. Does that count? Because it says the type of it says it was a colonoscopy, which is a 10-year look back, and it says it was done 8 years ago. Can we make an assumption, or must it say it was done in 2011?
This is Deb from.
Go ahead, Deb.
No, I'm sorry, Katie. I was going to say, in terms of the measure, as Katie has said, the year is required per the specification on page 8. As far as what would be accepted in an audit, I'm not sure if there's anyone else on the call that can answer that.
Okay, we can always come back to that question if somebody would like to provide further clarification. All right, next question. We've been getting a few questions about this actually, so please can you clarify whether Cologuard is a FIT DNA test and not an FOBT?
Hi, thanks for the clarifications that are coming through the queue. Really do appreciate the opportunity to clear this up for everybody. So Cologuard is a FIT DNA. We're going to go ahead and take those slides that were presented today and just make sure that they are updated to represent that. And then just to point everybody back to the specifications for PREV6 and that numerator, just be aware that there are time frames associated with the different tests that would meet that numerator performance. So thanks for the question. Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, all right, your next question is again about Care2 Falls. Are we able to count a falls assessment that was performed for a patient at a facility that is not operated by our system?
So as far as that measure specification requires, as long as you have documentation of the falls screen, it can be used regardless of setting. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, we will go to the phone line for our next question by Mary Hickey. So Mary, we are unmuting your line and you may go ahead and ask your question. Mary Hickey, your line is unmuted and you can ask your question. Okay, we'll move on to another caller, Michael Levant. Michael, you are unmuted and you can ask your question.
Hi, thank you. So my question, actually, it's a two-parter. So earlier there was a caller who asked for some clarification around the high blood pressure, and part of the response provided information about what kind of a blood pressure would be accepted, and someone mentioned that if the beneficiary had a emergency room visit that day, that we could move on. Could someone restate that and perhaps point me to where that is written in documentation? And then the second portion of my question would be more just a request, is that the caller, I think almost directly before, who had questions about the colonoscopy, whatever answer comes from that, if that could be shared with all callers. Thank you.
Hi, this is Katie from the PIMS team. So I will take your first question in regard to the hypertension inquiry. So for 2019, due to the fact that there are no, the CMS Web Interface does not require you to confirm an encounter type for the numerator action. You can use a blood pressure from an ED or inpatient setting if it's within normal parameters. So to restate, although the measure is intended to be outpatient, you can use the blood pressure readings from any clinical settings when reporting the numerator. However, if the most recent blood pressure from an ED or inpatient setting is not within normal parameters, it would be acceptable to move on to the next most recent blood pressure. So this particular language is guidance that has been provided. It's not specifically spelled out, I suppose, in the measure specifications, but it's due to there's no restrictions in the coding when reporting the numerator. And I will hand things over to Jamie to respond to the Prev 6 inquiry.
Yeah, so just a couple suggestions. We will be updating the slides. They will be available, I think someone said, I think it was Lisa Marie, in about 2 weeks. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but that will be available on the library, within the resource library. And then additionally, if you want something quicker, I could encourage you to submit a ServiceNow ticket and we can go ahead and answer this question. You would have documentation of the response. So whatever option seems to work best for you.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. All right, your next question concerns Prev 10. Does a patient's egg allergy have to be documented every year that a patient still has an allergy, i.e. does it need to be updated or edited notes documented in the EHR? Because most EHRs probably just show the enter date, which would likely not fall in the measurement year.
Hi, this is Jamie Welch with the PIMS team. I appreciate this question. So I'm going to come from a measure perspective in response. The measure does indicate that the egg allergy has to be documented within the measurement, the flu time frame, that flu measurement period. I do appreciate that the EHR is likely showing that enter date. What my recommendation is on that piece, or if auditing would want to chime in here, the audit team, maybe we should just address this as a separate ServiceNow question or inquiry, and we could just sort of maybe dissect that a little bit with you and ensure we give you a proper answer.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, another questioner is asking for clarification on what was stated within the slides. So apparently on one slide it was stated that all questions on a depression screening tool must be answered to determine a summary score, and yet they thought that on another slide it was stated that a summary score is not required to be documented. So can you please clarify this in relation to Prev 12?
Hey, we may need to repeat that question or maybe come back to it. If you could come back to that question, maybe we just need a little more prep time.
Of course, we can come back to that. All right, your next question asks, for Prev 12, if a patient who is nonverbal and is documented as having intellectual disability, is that the same as an exception of patient functional capacity?
Hi, this is Katie from the PIMS team. So for Prev 12, in order to use this denominator exception, you would need to have medical record documentation that the patient was not screened due to their particular diagnosis or situation or scenario. So in this particular instance, if you have medical record documentation that the patient was not screened due to their diagnosis, it would be appropriate to select it, but you would need to ensure that it was documented in the medical record why the patient wasn't screened. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, we will go to the phone line for our next question. It's from Debbie Puccio. So Debbie, we are unmuting your line and you may go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you very much. My question is, I'm hearing a few different times that this certain documentation, such as that the provider must write negative or positive, or the name of the test must be labeled as PHQ-9. Is there written documentation anywhere that we can distribute to our providers since they're already in the measurement period for 2020 and we want to be sure that they're correct?
Hi, this is Fiona from the Shared Savings Program. This information was taken directly from the measure specifications. The information on slide 12 was taken directly from the 2020 measure specifications, and the page numbers are there, and the measure specifications were posted in the QPP resource library in December of 2019. So they're out there, and I think the link is actually to the resource libraries is actually on one of the slides in the presentation.
Great, thank you. In just a moment, we will go back to showing the Prep 12 slide for further clarification. All right, so your next question asks for further clarification on the note on Prep 12. So while we move back to the slide, can you let us know, can we take the PHQ-2 score with no or 0 as a screen for negative for depression, or must a clinician document in the medical records that PHQ-2 shows negative for depression? In past years, CMS has accepted the perfect 0 score and the no as a path for depression screening without further documentation of positive or negative.
This is Fiona from the Shared Savings Program again. As noted on slide 12, we will accept previously allowed documentation for the 2019 performance year.
All right, and we are showing the Prep 12 slide. We will keep that up for a little while for further clarification. All right, so we will go back to the phone line. David Harriman, we are unmuting your line, and you may go ahead and ask a question.
Are you able to hear me?
Sorry, is that David Harriman? You may go ahead.
Okay, hi. So I was actually just going to be asking about Prep 12. Want to confirm you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So this really is getting to the question of how it is audited. I'm not just asking about the 2019 period, but really, like the previous person asking a question, concerned about the interpretation for going forward for 2020 as well. So it's really for both of these. Are we to assume then that with the audits that we are not allowed to, the auditors would not be able to analyze the actual user interface, which in our system clearly labels the results within the PHQ-2, and there is actually a detailed descriptor that says that anything above the level of 3, which was determined by our eligible clinician medical staff, equals a positive score. Are we actually saying that that would still need to be in a note? And I understand the talking point right now is going to be what we accepted in 2018 is what we're accepting for 2019, but that doesn't help those of us who are trying to think about what we're doing right now. And I've had a ticket out with Telegen for several weeks now, and they keep just saying it's under review. So I'm wondering, auditors don't use screenshots to determine the context in which the provider saw their workflow and signed off on that encounter? They have to actually bring things into their note?
Hi, this is Sandra from the Shared Savings Program. As you see on the slide for 2020, we will be following the measure specifications, and the measure specifications on page 10 say the results must be reviewed or verified and documented by an eligible professional in the medical record on the date of the encounter to meet the screening portion of this measure. Thank you.
All right, great, thank you. All right, going back to the questions tab, your next question concerns Prep 13. It asks, if there are ICD codes found in documents as E78, can that still be considered?
So this is Deb. For all of the coding within these documents, that for mapping purposes, the coding is considered all-inclusive. We can tell you you're certainly welcome to use a code that you find to help you look in the medical record documentation for the information that's needed to support whether it's the denominator confirmation or the numerator quality action, but you will need to find medical record documentation, and we can't tell you to use a code that's not part of the code set in your mapping. We would also just like to ensure that you recognize that medical record documentation would be needed even if you were to find a code within the coding document. The code alone is not is not sufficient, you need to be able to find the medical record documentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that clarification. All right, going back to the Prep 12 question that was asked earlier, they are looking for clarification, as on one slide it was stated that all questions on the depression screening tool must be answered to determine a summary score, and then they thought that it was stated elsewhere that a summary score was not required to be documented. So please, can you clarify this?
Hi, this is Angie with PIMS. There are actually two different slides, and the first was actually for the MH1 depression remission measure, and that does require that a score is documented. It doesn't have to have the entire questionnaire in there, but that a PHQ-9 was done and the score, because to be in the denominator, there has to be a PHQ-9 greater than 9. Then to show remission for the numerator, and I just want to make sure I don't say the wrong number, you have to have 5 or less, I believe. So that's why a score is needed for the MH1 measure. I'm sorry, less than 5. Okay. So then the Prev 12 measure does not require a score, just documentation of the tool used for screening and whether the results were considered positive or negative. Does that answer that question?
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
It does seem to. We will let you know if that comes back, and we will flag for you. Okay, so in the next few questions asked, can the measure be satisfied if a patient receives a flu vaccine in September of the measurement year?
Can you read that question one more time?
Of course. It asks, can the measure still be satisfied if the patient receives a flu vaccine in September of the measurement year?
We may, Deb put me on mute. Sorry about that. We may need a little bit more information just to make sure that we're tracking to the right years. So either supply a ServiceNow ticket and we'll make sure we get an answer for you, or maybe if you have time, clarify it within the chat. But yeah, just a little more information would be helpful. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, your next question asks, regarding Care 2, can a fall risk assessment from an inpatient encounter be counted for this measure?
I don't have to. And this is Deb from the PIMS team. Again, the setting for Care 2 doesn't matter as long as you have documentation of a falls screen. And to go back to the Prev 7, I have pulled that up. The Prev 7 measure, the flu season being measured is actually from October 1 of 2018 to March 31st of 2019. So if you do a previous receipt in September of 2018, that would meet the previous receipt requirement of the measure. But if you're talking about September of 2019, that is not the flu season being measured, even though that is the reporting period of your 2019 year. So the information you're providing on all of these measures is for 2019. However, with the flu season being measured is October 1, 2018 to March 31st of 2019.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. All right, so we've got a few minutes left. We will go back to the phone line for one more question. It's from Jennifer Suscala. So Jennifer, we have unmuted your line and you may go ahead. Jennifer Suscala, you may go ahead. Okay, we'll move on to another phone caller from Susan Gunter. Susan, we've unmuted your line and you may go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, you may go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to point out, and I may have missed something because I caught the tail end, but the beneficiary Excel form from the web interface, when you hit on the help for that measure for Prev 7, it actually says August 1st to to March 31, even though I know that the flu season is October 1. It says you can actually take from August 1st to 3/31, and that's actually in the web interface document.
Yes, you're right. That's the previous receipt time, and that is in the measure specification. So the flu season is October to March, but the previous receipt is allowed, and that previous receipt time period goes to August.
Okay, great, thank you. And now I believe that the PIMS team has an HTN2 clarification to share.
Hi, yes, this is Katie from the PIMS team. So we just wanted to circle back to the discussion of using ED and inpatient encounters for the numerator. So as we've stated before, this measure is intended to be outpatient. You are not required to use those inpatient settings to confirm the most recent blood pressure for the numerator. What we're trying to say is that you are allowed to use blood pressures from an inpatient or ED setting if it's within normal parameters, but you are by no means required to use those inpatient settings as the measure is intended to be outpatient. So I hope that helps provide some clarification. And if there are any other questions regarding that topic, please submit a question to qpp@cms.hhs.gov. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, looks like we have time for just one or two more questions. So your next question asks, they recall the in-hospice as a disqualification reason includes patients who receive palliative care. Could you please give some examples that would qualify for the evidence or documentation of palliative care? And also, if a patient stopped receiving palliative care during the calendar year 2019, would you still use in-hospice to disqualify that patient?
Hi, this is Katie from the PIMS team. I'm going to try to keep the answer brief. I would also suggest submitting this question to qpp@cms.hhs.gov. But for purposes of the CMS Web Interface measures, there's not a strict definition for palliative care usage to select not qualified for sample. So if you have medical record documentation that the patient received palliative care goals within palliative care, as long as you have the medical record documentation showing that they're receiving palliative care during the measurement period, you should be able to utilize not qualified for sample. In terms of whether they stopped receiving palliative care, that's something we might need to take a closer look at. So again, please submit that follow-up question to qpp@cms.hhs.gov. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, so that looks like that's all the time we have today. So Lisa Marie, if you'd like to go ahead and close out the webinar.
Great, thanks. Thank you all for joining us today. The slide deck recording and transcript from today's call will be available on the QPP webinar library in the next 2 weeks. As a reminder, our next support call is scheduled for next Wednesday, February 5th from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, during which we'll cover assignment and sampling, frequently asked questions, as well as frequently asked measure questions regarding HTN2, MH1, and PREP12. We hope you'll be able to join us. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.